So when we talk about the Jets were certainly a surprise team going in there by week 3-3. But I think the Houston Texans absolutely are one of the biggest surprises, shocks of the NFL. We talked about them in the preseason, and we were not very optimistic, not at all. Like we talked about Bryce Young being in a better situation, going to the Carolina Panthers. That team hasn't won a game. CJ Stroud. Yes, he threw his first interception. Yes, he finally broke his record-breaking interceptionless streak to start a career. I believe it was 194 pass attempts before that streak finally came to an end. But they won the game, which is the most important thing for the Houston Texans. It doesn't matter interceptionless streak. I mean, that's arbitrary. They went and beat the New Orleans Saints, who at least to start the year were the NFC South favorite. They have another good win on their record against the AFC North leading Pittsburgh Steelers. And lest we forget, they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were supposed to be the cream of the crop coming out of the AFC South. They beat them bad. So this Houston Texans team, I'm obviously impressed with them. Kyle Ledbetter, I know you haven't been very high on the Texans over the last few years. What do you think of them now?
Oh, you mean the worst run organization in football that hired their team pastor to run their team and helped fuel three different organizations' most successful runs of the last 15 years? Yeah, that Texans team. Here's my thoughts on the Texans. CJ Stroud looks pretty good, huh? That's pretty much my thought. CJ Stroud looks pretty good. And they've kind of fixed that offense, right? Like they're not world beaters on the offensive side of the ball, but they are right now 11th in the NFL in DVOA ranking. They have, I believe, going into last week. I don't know what the numbers are after last week, but the Texans have fixed the offensive side of the ball. They have very skilled players across different position groups. They've invested a lot in the offensive line. I mean, I know Kenyon Green's been out for season and Josh Jones was out to start the season. Tunsil came back from injury, but they have invested a lot on the offensive line. Even though Damian Pierce has been a decent running back, not great, not bad, pretty decent. Receivers that previously we thought were mute in the NFL and not really had much of a place have flourished with the Texans. Dalton Schultz looks just as good in Houston as he did in Dallas in that Mark Andrews tight end role. Nico Collins has been a legitimate wide receiver one this year. Saw Bobby Trees, Robert Woods had a touchdown last week, so he's at least still hanging around there. My big takeaway from Houston is the Texans have fixed their offense and they are showing signs of life going forward. And that is a positive that any kind of positive the Texans haven't had in like 4 years.
I got to give a lot of credit to the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, because if you look around the NFL at this point, Mike McDaniel, what he's done in Miami, revitalizing that offense has been nothing short of amazing, right? Then we go to New York, where we mentioned again the surprise of the 3-3 Jets, despite Aaron Rodgers being out. Robert Saleh did start the year on the hot seat, but I think given what that defense has been, he's safe right now. He has job security. When it comes to the Houston Texans, though, DeMeco, first-year head coach, he brings Bobby Slowick over with him, the former 49ers passing game coordinator. And as you mentioned, you're seeing the changes in the offense. They do have a competent offense running through CJ Stroud, who's a rookie, who's really taken to this West Coast offense and made it his own. You could tell DeMeco out there, he's a leader of men. Men listen to him, and I think that that's obviously important as a head coach to have the support of your players. Obviously, I think it helps DeMeco that he's a very recent NFL player himself. He's a very young coach who had a successful NFL career, was a top end linebacker. He's loved in Houston, given his ties to the organization. And for what it's worth, I think him and Nick Caserio, I was a little hesitant to believe that that pairing would have worked out. But I do think that him and Nick Caserio are of like mind in how to build this team. The fact that they made such a bold decision to go out there and draft Will Anderson, to trade up to go get Will Anderson there and this draft right behind CJ Stroud. I think that that's telling me that your GM and your head coach think alike. And if your head coach says, I want that guy, which I think DeMeco was probably one of the biggest Will Anderson advocates in the room, saying, I want that guy, he's going to go get him. And that's promising when you consider making free agent decisions. I'm sure this year, after seeing a successful season from rookie CJ Stroud, if you told me the Texans were big time buyers going into this offseason, I would not be surprised. Take advantage of that rookie contract, right? Get in some more guys that you think can help build around Stroud. Nico Collins coming into his own, great. What they did with Tank Dell, I think, has been a solid late round draft pick for them. And I could see him really developing as one of Stroud's favorite targets. Obviously, you want to add more, and I don't think that they're done building. But 3-3 here, I mean, Hal, you mentioned the Colts could win the AFC South. You thought the Colts realistically could win the AFC South. Why not the Texans this year? I mean, they're 3-3. And again, they have the most important win on their schedule against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they kicked the Jacksonville Jaguars ass. So if the Jags slip up, why not the Texans out of the AFC South?
Well, that brings us to the defense, because for all the chatter about DeMeco Ryans being this defensive savant and the 49er defense coming over and everything like that, they have not shown marked improvement on defense. And part of that is Derek Stingley's been out for the entire season. Like, not having a former top 3 pick has made a difference for the Houston Texans. They don't have enough dudes on the defensive side of the ball. It's not scheme, it's not whatever else. They don't have enough talented players on the defensive side of the ball to compete with the best of the best NFL offenses.
Up though. What I would counter
the
with
Texans will
here,
show some level of improvement.
Yeah. Hold up. What I would counter with here is, though, they held the Saints to 13 points. They held the Falcons largely in that game. It took a comeback drive for them to get to 21 points there. Steelers only scored 6 points on them. Jags only scored 17. The Colts were the biggest outlier so far. And then, of course, the Ravens in week one, when you're starting rookie, of course, it's going to look a little bit ugly to start the season. Over the last 4 weeks, I mean, I'm looking at the top scoring team being 21 points. I don't think that defense is bad by any means.
The defense has not been very good. And part of that is the games where they score. If I remember correctly, the game against the Falcons where they held them to 20 points, I believe they only scored, I want to say like 18 or something like that.
Yes, they lost that game 21-19. But again, like, it has not been very good. You're saying that when their highest scoring output against them has been 21 points over the last 4 weeks.
That was one of those games where time of possession mattered. Like, I was watching that game on the red zone, and like what was happening is that as they got later in the game, I think the Falcons only had like 4 total possessions in the second half of that game. And so it became a game of like, we want to make sure that we are holding the ball as long as we possibly can, kind of stuff. And the defense hasn't allowed a ton of points there, but it hasn't been very good.
Well, yes, but I mean, points matter, obviously. Like, I don't know what the DVOA numbers say. I don't know how many yards they're allowing by comparison. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're keeping guys out of the end zone, which I do think that that's primarily how the Texans have to win games. If they're keeping guys out of the end zone and their quarterback is giving them just enough to win games, then that's position they can win a lot more games in. And if you want to dissect saying, okay, they played Derek Carr, who has an injured shoulder, or they played Desmond Ridder, or they played Kenny Pickett, they did beat, again, the hell out of Trevor Lawrence for what that's worth. Over the next couple weeks, I mean, hell, they get Bryce Young coming off bye week. Bryce Young hasn't looked great this season. They face the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, we know that he comes and goes with the wins. He could have a down performance. Joe Burrow and the Bengals. The Joe Burrow Bengals aren't the same Bengals that we thought they were coming into the year. And then they played the Josh Dobbs-led Cardinals. So over the next 4 weeks, they have some very winnable games coming up. So again, like I asked the question, why not the Texans out of this AFC South? Heck, if they beat the Jags again, coming off that 4-game stretch. So again, their next 5 games, they also have one more Jags game. They're looking pretty damn good, man. And this defense, again, I'm looking at the point totals here, and I'm having a hard time calling them a bad defense by any means.
Yeah, I think they are clearly better than the Titans. You could make an argument they're better than the Colts. I think them and the Colts are probably on the same tier right now of teams right now. It's just the Jaguars. Like, the Texans right now are 17th in DVOA. In SRS ranking, they're I believe they were 8th going into last week. I don't know what they are right now, but the Texans are an average NFL football team right now, and that has been because their offense is above average, their defense is below average. And you know, if we're having the conversation about like having the money to go forward and make improvements to the team, I think they want to concentrate that on the defensive side of the ball, like bringing in real legitimate talented defensive players in addition to the draft picks they've spent already. I think would be a wise investment for the Houston Texans going forward, because On the offensive side of the ball, maybe they lack a true wide receiver number one. Like maybe Nico Collins, who has put up wide receiver one numbers this year. Maybe you look at Nico Collins and say, we like that he's a number one, but we'd really like it more if we had a receiver better than Nico Collins. Maybe that's how they look at it. But assuming the offense continues to play at the level that it's at right now, which again is not a guarantee, injuries happen, rookie walls start to come in for some quarterbacks. Obviously, they're not the most talented offense in the world. I think we both agree they've outperformed expectations on the offensive side of the ball this year. So assuming the offense stays as good as it is, I don't see a reason why the Texans can't be 6-4 going into that next stretch of games that'll be a little more difficult. Houston could definitely go 3-1 in that 4-game stretch that you mentioned before. A lot of it, and this is my favorite kind of team, a lot of it's going to be like, we're going to score 30, our opponent's going to score 30, and it's going to be a coin toss game at the end. And those are my favorite kind of 7-10 or 8-9 or 9-8 teams to watch. The teams that aren't going to the playoffs, but their style of football to watch is very entertaining.
Okay, so again, let's talk about DeMeco Ryans a little bit. I think that this is a conversation we have every year. So usually Coach of the Year goes to, we didn't expect your team to be good, but you're actually good, so we're giving you this award. Would you say DeMeco is currently the front runner in that? I feel like him and Robert Saleh might have good cases. Hell, I want to give Kyle Shanahan it, but again, he's just doomed by his own team's success in terms of like his ability to win that award this year. What do you think of DeMeco for Coach of the Year?
Everyone's running for second place because Man Campbell's going to win Coach of the Year this year, but in the running for second place, I think DeMeco's in that group of like 2 to 6 who are like, yeah, we didn't expect your team to be good and has improved. They're probably going to have to win the AFC South for him to have a chance of finishing second place behind Man Campbell. But I do think what DeMeco Ryans is doing is a market improvement. And everyone says, if you're going to hire a defensive coach, make sure it's a special defensive coach. And I think the Texans are the big winners in that sense. It helps that DeMeco had the local connection to the team. He used to play for them. Obviously that job over any job he wanted in the league. He could have had any of the 5 coaching jobs that were available this offseason, and he chose the Texans job. And I think the Texans are lucky to have him there. He's not going to win Coach of the Year, but that doesn't mean that he has outperformed expectations for the Houston Texans, and him and that coaching staff have fixed the offense, and it looks like they have a quarterback for the next 10 years. And I think he would trade that in for any Coach of the Year recognition.
All right, guys. Well, what do you think of the Houston Texans to this point? 3-3 going into the bye week, have a very winnable stretch of games coming off that bye week. What do you think their final record will be? Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on our social medias. From Juju and Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.